Yep.
Welcome everyone to Business Insights on Monday, the 1st of March. Wow, first quarter is almost done. Business Insights is a very exciting webinar series hosted weekly on Mondays at midday by a panel of industry thought leaders for business owners who simply want to be in the know about the latest and most significant news and initiatives in the Australian business landscape and how they impact their business. Our panel of advisors are aimed to inform, educate and provide strategic insights in the changes in the economic, legislative and financial landscape that affects small business. We aim to guide our viewers to navigate business challenges through the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Now let's meet our panel of industry thought leaders. First, we've got Lisa Garrido from Enigma HR.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be here.
The next one is Ian McLaughlin from Imperium Accounting and Tax.
Morning, Adam. Morning, viewers. Great to be here.
Fantastic. And Sam Garashi from MoneyClick Private Wealth.
Thank you for having me on board.
And I'm Adam Lyle from Biz Doctor. Well, here we go. 1st of March. Just before I do that, though, I just want to give our disclaimer that all the views and expressions and information provided today is designed for general use only and not for your specific circumstances. If you require that advice, please reach out to our panel members after today, and I'm sure that they will be able to give you a helping hand. So without further ado, I'm going to start off pretty quickly here with Ian McLaughlin. What's going on in your accounting and tax world?
Thanks very much, Adam. So as you mentioned, today is the 1st of March. So that means that today the February JobKeeper declarations have opened. So that means that businesses now have until the 14th of March to log on and declare their February turnover and also their March expected turnover. And then once they do that, they will be eligible to receive their JobKeeper payments for the month of February paid in March. Now, I just wanted to also note, just in doing some reading over the weekend, the ATO is getting ready to pounce once JobKeeper finishes on the 28th of March. Now, what does that mean? It means that businesses really need to get a handle on their cash flow and their debts. And as I mentioned last week, if there is an outstanding debt with the ATO, enter it into a payment arrangement. Don't go unlodged. You do not want to go into this situation where you do not lodge 1, 2, 3, 4 BASs in a row, because that amount will eventually catch up with you. The best way to do it is to make sure that you have a proper working cash flow for a 12-month period. And in those 12 months, you'll be able to see your expected bank balance. Within that, if we set up a payment plan with the ATO, we're going to be factoring in those payments there. So that tool is going to be vital to make sure that you can survive. But I have noticed over the last 12 months that the ATO has gone on a holiday in terms of chasing up debts, but that is all expected to change in the next coming weeks. Another thing that I wanted to mention today was the New South Wales government dining scheme, and I want businesses to be aware of this. Now, in particular, the businesses in the industries being cafes and restaurants, pubs, wineries, bars and clubs, scenic and sightseeing transport, cinemas, museums, galleries, zoos, botanic gardens, wildlife parks, performing arts operations, amusement, theme and water parks, recreational activities such as go-karting, indoor climbing, mini golf, billiards, bowling or ice rinks. So there's a whole range of different industries there that are going to qualify for this if they have an eligible business. And what the New South Wales government is offering is for individuals over the 18, 4 times $25 vouchers to use at those establishments. So that's $100 all up per person. Now, in order for the businesses to register, they need to register with Service New South Wales. Okay, so they need to set up a Service New South Wales account, and they need to clarify that they do qualify. So you're gonna have to put your driver's license, Medicare card, and passport number. Okay, and then you're gonna have to put your business details, and then your ABN. When you set your ABN up, you had to say what industry that was in. So if that ABN is in an industry that I just mentioned, then you will qualify for this. Now, the other question is what do the individuals do in order to get access to these vouchers? Similarly, they need to register with Service New South Wales as well. And once this operation gets underway, they will be emailed their vouchers. So I think that's a great way to try and generate some money back into the local economy in those areas. So it's not yet open, but once it is, I will let you know. And that's it for me today, Adam.
Helps if I make sure I unmute myself. Fantastic, Ian. I'm really surprised that those support mechanisms haven't gone further beyond those sectors, but and I'm surprised that the federal government haven't done a similar scheme, but that's okay. Hey, anything is better than nothing. But of course, you've got to be compliant, you've got to register. Thank you very much. Lisa, one thing I've noticed recently is that people power seem to have a lot more influence within workplaces these days, particularly with this whole work from home continuation process. What's the latest from you?
Thank you, Adam. Last week, I spoke a lot about the rules regarding annualized salaries changing. So just as a recap, I did mention that effective today, the 1st of March, if you pay employees with an annual salary, you will have additional obligations regarding record keeping, pay entitlements, and also notifying your employees of the agreed salary. So this will really alert small to medium-sized businesses that do not have any kind of notification or agreement in place, that yes, you do need to start having these in place. So I talked about what employers should do about the new rules. So you should take some steps to ensure that your payroll system and record keeping procedures are up to date, because overall these changes, which I'll go through in a bit, will create a lot of burden in terms of administration to ensure that you pay your employees in accordance with the award. And many employers might find the new annualized salary arrangements difficult to implement, and of course, time consuming to manage. So I'm giving a few tips just to make sure that you start to transition, if you haven't already, into the new annualized wage changes. Because if you fail to comply with these terms, you could face the risk of underpayment claims from your employees and severe penalties for breaches of the modern award. So in terms of what we talked about last week, I'm just going to share a screen just to make sure that we've got the recap. So I did mention these are the modern awards affected by the changes effective today. So I'm not going to read them out, but just so that our viewers can see that fairly quickly. And continuing that, another 6 or 7 awards that are affected. So I also spoke last week about the 5 ways of actually implementing these changes. So the first option, which I'm going to talk about today, and I'll elaborate on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th next week. The first option is to basically choose to annualize your employees' wages over a 12-month period by paying a set amount in satisfaction of the modern award requirements. There will be no room for any loose arrangements anymore effective today. But you also need to advise your employees by preparing a notification or agreement about what that set amount is. Then you need to record the amount payable in that agreement, the term of the modern award satisfied by the annualized wage arrangement, and the outer limit of the number of hours or overtime hours in the given pay period or roster. So you do need to start to anticipate that if there are some reasonable hours worked outside of the ordinary hours, you need to preempt what those outer limits are and actually indicate that in this agreement or notification. Then you need to pay any amounts worked in excess of that outer limit, and you will the payment will be in way of a penalty rate or overtime rate. That is in addition to the annualized salary that you already set out in that agreement. You will then need to conduct a reconciliation every 12 months or upon the employee's termination. Again, to make sure that over the 12-month period or the period of termination or the period of employment before termination that you've actually paid them all of the items or hours in excess of that outer limit. Now, the trick here is that you will need to keep a written record of the start times, the finish times, and the unpaid breaks taken. And this must be signed and acknowledged by the employee as correct. So again, if you haven't got your payroll systems and record keeping intact, use technology or use applications that you might need to do a bit of research on. There are a lot of payroll applications that actually have a timekeeping or timesheet application or module in it. Please make sure that you activate that if you have that already. Once you've done that, you still need to pay the difference between the amount payable under the award and the annualized salary. So the differences in the provision, the provisions prior to 1st of March and now is that there's a requirement for an agreement, an arrangement, and the requirements on how the annual salary is calculated is also stated in the clauses of the modern awards affected, with one clause requiring the calculation of the minimum percentage uplift on the minimum award, depending on that modern award. So if an employer chooses this option, which in essence is a compliance requirement anyway, you need to keep in mind all of these items I've just discussed. So again, to sum up, check if your employees fall under the relevant awards I've listed beforehand. Are some or all of your employees captured by these awards? Ensure your payroll system and record keeping procedures are up to date, but always consider your own business and determine the options that you need to take. I will discuss option 2, which is the having an employment contract and setting off the annualized wage implementation with that employment contract. And the third option is what you call individual flexibility arrangements. So I'll be talking about those next week. And that's it. That's the update for me, guys.
Well done, Lisa. And if you can just stop your screen share, that'd be great. Lisa, you scared me for a moment there because you mentioned the word timesheets, and us people who've worked in professional firms, timesheets, they just start to give me twitches when I hear that. But speaking of a guy who would be completely all over his timesheets, and I'm sure his team are as well, Sam Qureshi, geez, the markets at the moment and the property, it's all bubbling away nicely.
Yeah, it certainly is very crazy at the moment from that front. Of course, the big story on the interest rate side is that the bond yields have been rising, and as a result, we've seen for the first time in quite a while, the market is starting to think that there might be a rate increase sooner than the 3 or 4 years that was already discussed by the governor. Obviously, it's early at this point in time. It's the first time that we've seen this change, but it is an indication of the same. Thought I'll actually share with you that particular chart that you'll be able to see. This shows the implied volatility in the cash rate, and as you can see, up until now it's always been pointing downwards, but now we've started to see it pointing upwards for the first time in a very long time. So I guess it's not quite at a point where it's going to be going up to say the 0.25%, which is up here somewhere as yet. But obviously this changes every day. I only was looking at this a couple of weeks ago and it was still sitting all flat down here. So it can change pretty quickly. But for now, the rate seems to be steady. Nothing new to report from that perspective. Although I have to say that from a mortgage perspective, we've had a couple of valuations for purchases starting to come short, as in the valuers aren't valuing the properties based on the contract prices that are coming in. And so that really suggests that the property market is well and truly getting ahead of itself when you have shortages on contract of sales. So for the viewers, obviously, if you're looking to purchase a property, just goes to show you need to be warned and do not overpay for a property, of course. Now, we had a very strong auction results. Again, another week of that, and a lot more properties for sale as well, which was amazing. Victoria came in at 84%, which is again another 30% increase in the number of properties that sold at the auction since a week ago. And New South Wales, well above 90% again. And all the other states are holding up really well as well. So, so there's definitely a lot of property activities, and obviously that's been driven by the interest rates at the moment in particular. And so imagine if we actually had an open borders as well. So then there was more migration in, you know, it'll be even crazier. So be interesting to see how it all plays out. Now onto the markets. Markets had a crazy week last week. It all went downhill. ASX was down 1.8%. Asia Pacific was down more than 3%. US Dow was down -2. NASDAQ -5. We've had a bit of a rebound today, but basically these bond yields, these rising bond yields, have affected how the market is behaving. So more news to come from that as it goes. But the big thing I wanted to touch base on this week is the rise of the Australian dollar. So if you've been noticing this, the Australian dollar to US dollar has been increasing. It's almost approaching the 90 cents mark. I've got a little chart for you here to see, and you can see that it's basically as high as it was 3 years ago when things were basically cooking. So you can see the bottom of the pandemic, how much it dropped and how much it has increased over time. Now for the listeners and viewers, basically when you have a rising Australian dollar to US dollar, it's an indication that the economy is strengthening. So that's actually good. But it can also have undesirable effects on the country as well. So some of those could be because of the commodity. Well, some of the reasons behind the increase has been because the commodity prices has been going up. Iron ore prices in particular are nearing the record highs. US dollar is weakening. So because they're weakening, essentially ours strengthens. And of course, the interest rates between Australian bonds here and in US is that differential. There's a premium attached to that right now in Australia, which means that that affects our Aussie dollar. Now, for our economy, our higher Aussie dollar is not great for our Australian exporters because everything we sell overseas is going to be more expensive. And of course, we don't want that. It also makes imports cheaper, which basically puts our domestic producers at a disadvantage. So obviously that's not good as well. And of course, for the share market, any company, and we have many companies that are global in their reach, and many in overseas markets, including in US. And of course, those earnings in US will be worth less in Australian dollar because the dollar is increasing. So so there'll be what we call some headwind from an exchange rate perspective that we might see coming in over the next 6 months or so. Now, for those that have been following the Facebook Australian government stash, it looks like as if there was a compromise, and the news feed is back. So at least that's one good news from last week. Now, post the reporting season, we'll see more dividend flow come through to the shareholders. We're about to finish off the reporting season. Again, we've had some mixed results in the week that we've just had. More better results than worse results. So overall, probably more positive. And we should definitely expect better dividends that's going to come through compared to the prior 6 months of reporting. Now, of course, what that's going to really help is those self-funded retirees who, you know, they've had their money in the bank and basically earning nothing. So hopefully they'll have a bigger payday coming up. And that's my report for this week.
Thank you so much, Sam. And if you don't mind, I'm just having some difficulty because of the, there you go, screen share. Thank you. Fantastic. And I'm watching all of this with bated breath. And there's a reason why. So from my perspective, there's some very interesting statistics that are coming out in terms of insolvencies across the nation. And I'm going to share a graph with you now, today my main thing is about disaster prevention. So if we look at the graph on the screen of the companies that are going into administration during COVID, the light blue line talks about, it indicates the companies that went into administration during the course of 2020. And of course,
Adam, you need to share the slides, Adam.
Oh.
Yes.
so sorry. Hang on.
All right.
Share screen. I thought I had it. Oh, 2 seconds. I'm very sorry about this, folks. I thought I had it all ready to go. Share screen. There we go. Is that working now? I think it is. I apologise. So yes, the light blue line there indicates the companies that went into administration during the COVID year, and as in the financial year 2020. So as you can see, by week 25 there was a remarkable dip down, and then there was some resurgence and so on and so forth. Now the interesting thing is, during the course of last year there was a moratorium in place, and from the 23rd of March right to the 31st of December, no creditor could force a small business under $1 million into administration or liquidation, and certainly there were some parameters there that needed to be met. The interesting thing now is that in this financial year, as you can see, the numbers are quite considerably low, and in fact they almost mirror by half. Now there's already a spike up, and there's a point where it's coming down. Now the interesting thing here is that ASIC and the RBA are expecting some increase in insolvencies during the course of this year, but because of the amount of cash that's been injected into the economy by way of prevention strategies and also the cash flow boost and also JobKeeper, it could well mean that the plateauing out of insolvencies will be there, but it will be sustained over a longer period of time. So how do we prevent these disasters? Well, first of all, remember, don't panic. You're not alone. There's 2.1 million SME businesses out there. Number B, communicate. Communicate with your teams, communicate with your advisors, and communicate with your external stakeholders. Have real conversations with your landlords and your banks and the tax office and everyone that is potentially going to be interested in what you're doing and why you're taking so long to pay. If you give them real information and real data, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be pretty understanding. Make sure you're getting advice from your accountant and look to increase your compliance in order to reduce your debt. Now that is aimed at the tax office, which Ian rightly spoke about earlier. And I've mentioned a couple of episodes ago that we're going to have a situation where the tax office recovery program is going to be increased dramatically. They've actually put on 500 collections people nationally, and that's just the first wave. They are expecting another intake of about the same number. So just imagine 1,000 more people collecting debts for the tax office. And remember, you know, a lot of people believe that the tax office is Australia's biggest bank. And I know that comes across quite flippant, but when you can get basically an interest-free, well, not an interest-free loan, but a very low interest loan over a period of time, and in a lot of circumstances, you can get those penalties and interest waived if you increase your compliance and pay your principal debt. It can be viewed as a bank. So my point is that the insolvencies are still happening. They will continue to increase, probably over a longer period of time. Remember that 11% of all SME business owners are concerned and worried about avoiding insolvency. So it's something to really think about. How do you prevent it? Number one rule, go and see your accountant. Please listen to your accountant. Make sure your cash flow is well managed and keep under control all throughout. That's it from me, nice and quick and easy. This month is March, and as a very famous international politician said once, beware of the Ides of March. So are there any questions for any of the panel members?
I don't have a question, Adam, but I just wanted to add, you know, with regards to this compliance matter, when you're discussing these areas with your accountants, I just think that anyone that's got any employee at the moment, you really do need to look at these changes I've been talking about. Because the last thing you want as you're planning all of this with your accountant is you're actually in breach of the amount that you need to be paying your staff, because the fines and the consequences are massive. The impact on net cash flow will be massive. So again, just please be mindful. This is what this panel is about. It's us giving you a lot of these updates and information so that you're in the know. That's just my addition to that.
I do have a question from Wendy, who's put up a question on our Facebook live stream. And she's saying, look, the Australian dollar is now at 77.63 cents US. And she's asked, Sam, do you think that that's going to continue to rise on the spot there?
Oh, yeah, it's a $63,000 question. At this point in time, the trajectory is upwards. And I guess it depends on a number of factors. So if the US dollar continues to weaken, if our commodity prices continue to strengthen, and if that differential in the interest rates of the bonds here versus the US continues in the way that they are, then yes, there's cause for that to continue to increase. But of course, you know, things don't just increase linear, and they'll have many jagged ups and downs along the way because they're affected by many news on a daily basis. But certainly the trajectory is more upwards at the moment. And from some of the reports that I've seen, there is expectation that maybe it might hit 80 cents sooner than later.
Wow. Let's make America great again. All right. That's it from all of us, folks. Please reach out to Ian McLaughlin, Lisa Garrido, Sam Garashi, and myself if you would like any more information. Thank you for joining us. We do have a special guest presenter coming up midway through this month. She's a well respected specialist in the property industry and is regularly on television for Channel 7 and Sky. So we're looking forward to having her in the middle of the month. More to reveal about that next week. Apart from that, that's all of us signing off from here at Business Insights.